Hey, it's me, Rosalyn. I don't usually start my stories like this, but today feels different. Maybe because it's not just a story, it's my life. And if you stay with me, you'll see how a woman everyone once called broken walked into her ex-husband's wedding, with triplets on her hip, a man who actually loved her by her side, and dignity shining brighter than the chandeliers above us. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You deserve the full ride. It started on an ordinary Sunday afternoon. Mom and I were in the kitchen, the girls running around the living room with crayons and blocks. Life was noisy in the best way, laughter, dishes clinking, music low in the background. Then Mama's phone rang, an unknown Atlanta number. She almost ignored it, but something in her face shifted as she listened. Her eyes found mine, sharp and serious. "Baby, you need to hear this," she said. And then I heard the voice, smooth, familiar, dangerous. Jerome, the man I had once promised forever to. The man who had taken my love, my loyalty, and my savings and left me hollow. The man who swore I was barren, unworthy, disposable. The man I hadn't seen in years. And now, out of nowhere, he wanted me at his wedding. His voice dripped with confidence, like inviting me with some grand favor. He wanted me to celebrate him, to witness the empire he'd built with the money I had given, to clap for the family he claimed I could never give him. It wasn't kindness, it wasn't closure, it was a setup, a chance to humiliate me. For a second, the old me almost answered with silence. Almost let him win again. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't the desperate girl who believed love meant swallowing glass just to prove devotion. I had rebuilt myself, piece by jagged piece. I had found love in its truest form. I had built something real, something mine. And suddenly, the idea of showing up at that wedding didn't feel like punishment. It felt like destiny. Because Jerome had no idea who I'd become. No clue about the life I'd carved from the ruins he left behind. No hint that the woman he thought would crawl into his ballroom ashamed was about to walk in like the storm he never saw coming. This is not a fairy tale, though it might sound like one. This is a story about betrayal and survival, about falling so low you can barely breathe, and then rising higher than you ever thought possible. So, buckle up, pour yourself some tea or wine or whatever keeps you steady. You're not just going to hear what happened, you're going to feel it. Every red flag, every heartbreak, every little victory that stacked up until I was ready to face the man who once broke me. Because let me tell you, the night I stepped into Jerome's wedding in a deep green dress with a limousine waiting outside and three little miracles clutching my hands, the room went silent, and in that silence, I finally understood what it meant to win without even trying. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. Before you know the ending, you need to know the beginning. And that beginning, it wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy. It was a girl named Rosalyn, 23 years old, starry-eyed, thinking love could fix everything. I was 23 when I met Jerome. 23, broke but hopeful, working two jobs in Atlanta, one at a little diner off Peachtree, the other cleaning offices at night. My life back then smelled like coffee, grease, and cheap disinfectant, but I carried dreams bigger than my paycheck. And then he walked in. Jerome didn't just enter a room, he owned it. He was the kind of man who wore his confidence like a tailored suit. That day, he sat in my section at the diner, ordered pancakes, and asked my name with a smile so smooth I forgot how to breathe. He laughed at my jokes, tipped too much, and left his number on a napkin folded into a heart. "Call me," it said. Just 2 words, but they stuck to my ribs like honey. When he picked me up for our first date, he showed up in a shiny car that smelled like new leather and ambition. I remember thinking, this is it. My life is finally turning around. He talked about dreams, big ones, owning businesses, traveling the world, never being stuck in the same old neighborhood again. And for a girl who grew up watching her mama stretch a dollar until it screamed, it sounded like salvation. He told me he loved how I listened, how I believed in him. He said I made him feel like more than his past mistakes, and I ate it up, every word. Because when someone finally makes you feel seen, you forget to check if you're also being blinded. Looking back, there were signs, like the way he ordered food for me without asking, insisting he knew what I'd like. Or how he made little jokes about my clothes being cute but outdated, then offered to take me shopping, picking out dresses more for his taste than mine. One night after dinner, he leaned across the table and said, "Rosalyn, you're too good for where you come from. Stick with me, and I'll make sure you never have to worry about money again." I should have felt the chill of control in that promise. Instead, I felt warm, chosen, like he had built a bridge between who I was and who I wanted to be. We moved fast, too fast. Within 6 months, I was living in his apartment, wearing the ring he picked without asking my size, smiling for pictures that made it look like we were the perfect couple. Everyone said we looked like a fairy tale, and I believed them. But fairy tales have shadows the storytellers don't mention. There was one night, I can still see it, when he showed up late, smelling like cologne that wasn't his. I asked where he'd been, and he gave me that smile, the one that melted doubt like sugar in hot tea. He pulled me close, whispered promises, and for a moment, I pushed my questions down. Because believing him was easier than admitting what I feared. I told myself love was supposed to be tested. That if I just gave enough, prayed enough, believed enough, everything would fall into place. But deep down in that quiet place we all try to ignore, something whispered, "This isn't forever. This is a warning." And that, right there, was the first red flag. Married life began with pancakes and playlists, the kind of montage you post online. But real life isn't a filter, it's fluorescent lighting. At first, the small stuff felt sweet. Jerome's tidy rows of cologne, the way he ironed shirts like polishing armor. Then came the calendar. Month 1, month 2, month 6, negative. The word kept flashing like a warning. I bought tests in bulk, hid the boxes under the sink, timed everything with apps that pinged like tiny hopes. I whispered prayers into bathroom tiles, learned to smile with my eyes while my hands shook. Jerome didn't ask how I felt. He asked for results. Any news? From the doorway, towel at his waist, phone in his hand, while I wrapped the strip in toilet paper like it was evidence of a crime against him. When I suggested we see a doctor, he laughed sharp. "Babe, I have a son. You've seen the pictures. Clearly, I'm fine." He pointed at Fred's photo on the mantle like a trophy he dusted more than his conscience. Let's not invent problems. So I didn't invent them. I scheduled them. Blood work. Hormone panels, ultrasounds with techs who asked soft questions and typed fast. HSG dye that burned like truth. I lay under cold machines and tried to relax my face, the way women do when we want strangers to think we're brave. I kept the receipts in a Ziploc bag because numbers felt safer than feelings. Every result said the same thing, normal. My doctor smiled gently, as if I stood on thin ice. "If your partner can be tested," she said, "we'd have a fuller picture." My partner refused to be a picture at all. At home, his patience evaporated with the steam of his showers. "You're stressing yourself out," he said. "Stress makes it harder. Try not thinking about it." He squeezed my shoulder just a hair too long, a warning disguised as comfort. Red flags bloom quietly. That's how they fool you. He began rating dinners like Yelp, 3 stars, needs more seasoning, 2 stars, overcooked, 1 star, what's wrong with you? If I asked about Veronica texting at midnight, he tilted his head. You jealous of a co-parenting schedule? If I cried, he sighed like I was a stubborn stain he couldn't lift. Friends drifted. I got good at excuses. We're busy. He's working late. I'm tired. The truth was heavier. I was disappearing by inches, sanding down parts of myself to fit a frame he kept shrinking. One afternoon, I sat in a parking lot after another appointment, the paper gown still ghosting my skin, and watched a woman push a stroller past my windshield. I didn't want her life. I wanted mine back. The one where I laughed loud and believed love was soft, not sharp. When I brought home the folder stamped with normal and cheerful healthcare font, Jerome didn't look up from his phone. "Great," he said. "Then quit obsessing." I told him the doctor recommended he get checked too. His eyes went cold like a door slamming. "I'm not the problem. Don't say that again." The next morning, there were bruises on my wrist that looked like fingerprints. He hadn't hit me. Not technically. That's the trouble with not technically. You can't show a jury that your house learned to go silent when his key turned. I started talking to myself while I cooked, measuring out hope like teaspoons. Maybe next month. Maybe if I run more, whoa. Maybe if I pray better, maybe if I become smaller, quieter, easier to love. Sunday at church, the pastor preached about mountains moving. I closed my eyes and pictured my body like a door swinging open to light. After service, a woman hugged me and pressed a card into my palm. "Just in case you need someone to talk to," she said. Therapist. I slid the card into my wallet like contraband. That night, Jerome announced we were tight on cash, and maybe I should cut back hours because a real wife keeps the home. The irony whistled through the room. My hours kept the lights on. Still, I nodded, already calculating coupons. The glass didn't shatter in one dramatic crash. It spidered, line by line, pressure finding every weak spot until the whole pane hummed with threat. I told myself I could live with the cracks. Then he found the savings. He held the bank statement like a smoking gun. $12,000? You've been sitting on 12 grand while I'm out here grinding? His voice was calm. Calm is scarier than loud. I opened my mouth to explain, house someday, maybe treatments, a safety net with my name on it. But he was already smiling, soft, charming, strategic. Baby, he said, I have an opportunity. And just like that, the floor tilted. When Jerome said, I have an opportunity, his eyes lit up like he'd just been handed the keys to a kingdom. He talked about a laundromat deal. Low risk, high reward, he swore. A place where money washed in and doubled itself, like magic. All he needed was seed capital, my seed capital. 12,000, babe. Think about it. That little nest egg of yours can finally grow. It won't just sit there collecting dust. This is for us. Us. The word rolled off his tongue like sugar, but I tasted rust. Still, I wanted to believe. Believing felt safer than fighting. I nodded slowly, though something in my chest screamed, no. Before signing over the money, I pressed record on my phone, hidden under the counter. His voice spilled out. It's for us, Rosalyn, for our future together. I didn't know it yet, but that tiny file would be my lifeline years later. After the transfer, Jerome was golden. New clothes, late nights, smiling too wide like he'd swallowed the sun and didn't plan on sharing. The laundromat opened, yes, but I rarely saw the inside. He said it was under control. What I saw was him glowing in ways that had nothing to do with detergent or dryers. The bruises began the way storms do, dark clouds you tell yourself will pass. A squeeze too tight on my shoulder when I asked about receipts. A grip on my wrist that lingered after I suggested we budget more carefully. A low hiss in my ear. Don't nag me, Rosalyn. No man likes a nag. He never hit me, not with fists. That made it harder to name, but my body learned the language of flinching. Finances spiraled. He insisted my part-time job at the diner made him look bad. My wife doesn't need to sling hash browns, he sneered. You've got me. He cut my hours by cutting my self-worth. I cooked meals from coupons and smiled like it was a choice. Meanwhile, he shined in public. At parties, Jerome became a motivational speaker no one asked for. Dream big, hustle harder, don't let anyone drag you down. People clapped. I stood beside him, the supportive wife, while inside I was shrinking. And then there was Veronica, always Veronica. She was his co-parent, the reason for late-night texts and sudden trips. I told myself boundaries existed, that shared custody meant communication. But the smirk on his face when her name lit his phone told another story. One night I asked directly, is there something more with her? He laughed, not kind laughter, mocking. You jealous of a woman raising my son? That's pathetic. Pathetic. The words stuck like gum in my hair. I cried in the bathroom until my chest ached. When I returned, Jerome was asleep, phone face down on the nightstand. I stared at it, daring myself to look. I didn't. Not then. Sunday dinners with Mama grew shorter. She asked if I was happy, and I perfected the art of lying with my teeth showing. Of course, Mama. He's just stressed with work. She didn't press, but her eyes held questions I was too scared to answer. The worst bruise was invisible. Silence. Our apartment learned to go still when Jerome came home. My laugh got quieter. My wardrobe shifted from color to neutral tones because color drew comments. Friends stopped inviting me out. They said, "You're always busy." And I was busy surviving. The only time I felt a spark was during therapy sessions I pretended were errands. I used the card that woman at church gave me. I sat in a soft chair, clutching tissues, whispering secrets to a stranger with kind eyes. She said words like gaslighting and emotional abuse. They sounded clinical, but they wrapped around my pain like labels on jars. See, this is real. You're not crazy? But therapy didn't pay bills. Jerome controlled those. The cracks widened the night he found out I'd skip my shift at the diner to rest. Lazy, he spat, shoving a plate across the counter so hard it shattered. His hand brushed my arm, not a strike, but the intention lived in the air. I froze, heart hammering. He saw the fear and smiled. That smile told me everything. He liked knowing he could break me without ever leaving a mark. The next morning, when I pulled on long sleeves to hide fingerprints shaped like shadows, I whispered to my reflection, Hold on, just hold on. But I didn't know how much longer I could. The $12,000 disappeared faster than the seasons. One moment, it was a lifeline folded neatly inside my savings account. The next, it was fuel for Jerome's empire in the making. At first, I tried to believe. I wanted so badly to believe. The laundromat opened its doors, machines humming like a choir of promises. Jerome strutted around like a king cutting ribbons no one had asked for. He'd flash receipts in my face, not to prove success, but to silence questions. See, babe, money in, money out, you worry too much. But the numbers never added up. We were still behind on rent, still eating ramen while Jerome paraded in new suits. He called them investments in image. I called them silk disguises. The cruelest twist? The business actually was working. He had lines of customers, word spreading about quick service and spotless finishes. But success didn't bring him closer. It built a wall. He came home later, cologne I hadn't bought lingering on his shirts. He said Veronica needed him. Fred had a game. Veronica needed a ride. Veronica needed support. I started to hate her name the way a body hates poison. Silently, but completely. One night I brought it up. You're gone all the time. With her. He laughed like I'd told the funniest joke in town. Don't flatter yourself, Rosalyn. Veronica's just convenient. Convenient, that's what I was too, just in different currency. My money, my body, my silence, all convenient. Months blurred into years. 6 years. 6 years of being the invisible investor in a life I didn't even get to live. I watched Jerome's chest puff bigger, his circle of friends richer, his smile sharper. The more he had, the less of me he wanted. And yet, I kept trying. That's the part that still burns when I think about it. How hard I tried. I learned recipes I couldn't afford to cook. I whispered prayers into empty rooms. I wore lipstick to bed like beauty could heal betrayal. The breaking point arrived not with violence, but with laughter. I came home early, arms full of groceries. Through the door, I heard them, Jerome and Veronica, laughing together in my living room. The sound carved me open. She's so pathetic, Veronica said, her voice sharp with triumph. Still playing house like it's real. Jerome chuckled. She gave me 12 grand, cleaned out her whole account. She'd probably give me a kidney if I asked nice enough. Their laughter crashed over me like glass shattering in slow motion. I didn't storm in, didn't scream. I sat in my car for 2 hours, engine off, replaying every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every prayer. And then, like a ghost, I went inside, cooked fried chicken and mac and cheese, his favorite, while my hands shook. I watched him eat it like nothing had happened, like my world hadn't ended in the driveway. 3 days later, he tossed divorce papers onto the kitchen counter. Sign these, I'm done. Just like that. I wanted to fight, begged him for counseling, compromise, anything. He shrugged. I don't love you like that anymore. When I asked about the money, about the business, he smiled a smile that could kill. That was a gift. You can't take back a gift. No prenup, no protection, nothing left but ashes. He moved Veronica and Fred into our house before the ink dried. Within weeks, I was shoving my clothes into garbage bags, packing my Honda Civic with the scraps of a 6-year marriage. The $12,000 that was supposed to build our future had instead bought my exit. That night, driving north with no destination but away, I pulled over at a rest stop and sobbed so hard I scared myself. Not delicate tears, raw animal grief. Grief for the woman I had been, for the home I had lost, for the future I thought was mine. When the storm of tears finally calmed, I whispered to the rearview mirror, "This is the bottom." I was wrong. The bottom hadn't even introduced itself yet. Chicago air hit different. It smelled like old bricks, exhaust, and something fried on every corner. I hadn't been back in years, but the moment I stepped out of my beat-up Civic, luggage rattling behind me, it felt less like coming home and more like crawling back. Mama opened the door with that look only mamas have, the one that mixes relief with heartbreak. She hugged me hard, too hard, like she was afraid I'd vanish if she let go. "You're too skinny," she muttered, pulling back to study my face. "And your eyes, baby, you've been crying for months." I lied, of course, said I was fine, but the truth was heavy on my tongue. I was 29, divorced, broke, and childless. The kind of resume that makes you feel like a failure before you even apply for a new life. Her house hadn't changed. The faded floral couch, the pictures of family reunions, the smell of lemon pledge clinging to every surface. Except now, I noticed the pill bottles on the counter. Blood pressure, diabetes, Mama had been fighting her own battles quietly. I should have been here, I whispered that first night as she dozed in her recliner, TV flickering across her tired face. The days blurred. I unpacked in my old room, posters still on the walls, bed too small for my grown body. I slept late, cried often, stared at ceilings like they held answers. Depression moved in, unpacked faster than I had. And then there was Roberts, tall, lean, camera slung around his neck like it had grown there. He was hired to document revitalization projects in the neighborhood, which meant he was always around, pointing that lens at boarded-up stores and cracked sidewalks, trying to find beauty in decay. He noticed Mama's shuttered restaurant. "This place has bones," he said one afternoon, eyes lighting up. Mama blushed like a schoolgirl, telling him stories about the days when the place buzzed with Sunday dinners and laughter. I hid, literally, behind curtains, in my bedroom, anywhere his kind eyes couldn't find me. I wasn't ready for kindness, not after Jerome. Kindness felt suspicious, like bait. But Roberts didn't push. He'd just wave, sometimes sit on the porch with a thermos, sipping coffee in silence. "Don't gotta talk," he told me once, catching me sneaking outside. "Company's enough." 3 months passed like that. 3 months of him fixing Mama's leaky sink, hauling groceries, laughing at her jokes. 3 months before I cracked open and spilled my story. I expected pity, maybe judgment. Instead, Roberts got mad, for me, his voice low but fierce. That man was a fool. Someday he's gonna realize what he lost. Something inside me flickered. Not love, not yet, just possibility. Therapy followed. Mama pushed me, Roberts encouraged me, and I found myself on a stranger's couch again, unpacking trauma like dirty laundry. "You're not broken," the therapist said. "You were lied to." Slowly, I believed her. Mama's restaurant became a symbol. Dusty, yes, but sturdy, like me. The more I stared at it, the more I thought about second chances. What if I could breathe new life into it? Not the same greasy plates, but something better, healthier. I read business books in the library, researched food trucks, sketched menus at 2 a.m. while Mama snored. Roberts noticed. "You're cooking again," he said, smiling like that meant more than I knew. But every dream hit the same wall. Money. I had none, not even a safety net. Every paycheck from my grocery store job evaporated into bills and prescriptions. One night, while washing dishes, I whispered to Mama, "What if I fail again?" She dried her hands on a towel and tapped my chin up. "Baby, failure ain't falling. It's refusing to stand up again." Her words branded themselves on my heart. Still, part of me stayed scared. Scared of love, scared of risk, scared of being that desperate woman again. But standing still hurt worse. And deep down, I knew, if I didn't fight for something new, I'd drown in the ruins of my old life. It started small, like all stubborn miracles do. One night I was chopping vegetables in Mama's cramped kitchen, and the smell of roasted garlic hit me with an idea. What if food could heal more than hunger? Not greasy plates or cheap fillers, real food, fresh and soulful. Something that nourished body and spirit. I scribbled in a notebook, quinoa bowls, smoothies, roasted veggie wraps, meals for families who didn't have time to cook, meals that made you feel lighter instead of weighed down. I called it a wild dream. Mama called it finally using that big brain God gave you. Money was the mountain, though. Mountains don't move easy. I worked dawn shifts at the grocery store, stocking shelves until my back screamed. Every paycheck got split into bills, Mama's meds, and the tiniest sliver for the dream fund. Sometimes I slipped coins into a jar labeled Nourish. It rattled like hope. Robert saw me sketching one night at the kitchen table. "This yours?" he asked, pointing to my drawings of leafy logos and salad bowls. I flushed. "Just ideas," he grinned. "Ideas build worlds, Rosalyn. Let me help." "I can't pay you." "Not asking for money," he said. "I want to document this, the comeback. People need to see what strength looks like in real life." And just like that, he became my shadow, with a camera. He filmed me hauling groceries, fumbling recipes, cussing out a blender that died mid-smoothie. He caught my laughter when Mama said my kale tasted like yard work. At first, I hated the lens, felt exposed, judged. But Roberts never pushed. He captured the truth. Sweat on my forehead, tears when recipes flopped, the rare smile when something actually tasted good. Slowly, the camera stopped feeling like surveillance and started feeling like proof. Proof that I was still trying, proof that I wasn't broken. I tested meals on Mama, She'd close her eyes like she was tasting the past and the future at once. "This one," she'd say after a forkful of grain bowl with tahini. "This is it, baby. This'll put your name back on the map." But fear clung like smoke. Failure had already carved scars in me. Could I risk another? Roberts noticed. "You're scared," he said one evening as I stared at bills stacked on the table. "Of course I'm scared. What if I lose everything again?" He leaned forward, voice steady. "Then we rebuild again. But what if it works? What if this is exactly what you were meant to do?" Those words wrapped around me like armor. I started small, homemade meal prep containers for neighbors. Fresh salads, jars of smoothies, cash tucked into envelopes felt like the first brick in a foundation. Word spread. "That girl Rosalyn's cooking again." Orders trickled in. It wasn't profit yet, but it was momentum, and momentum is addictive. The restaurant building, Mama's shuttered dream, suddenly looked less like a tomb and more like a canvas. I'd run my hands over its dusty counters, whispering, "You'll shine again." But nights were still heavy. I'd collapse into bed, whispering prayers not for success, but for courage. For the strength to keep showing up even when exhaustion begged me to quit. Some mornings I wanted to, until I'd find Roberts on the porch, coffee in hand, camera slung, waiting with that patient smile. He never said much, just, "Ready?" And somehow, I always was. By the end of that year, I had regulars. Families, tired workers, even health-conscious teens. They came for food, but stayed for connection. Mama's house buzzed again, not like the old restaurant, but like a seedling pushing through cracked concrete. One night, Robert showed me a rough cut of the footage. Me, sweaty and determined, Mama taste testing, neighbors praising. Over it, his voice. "This isn't just food. This is rebirth." I cried watching it, not out of sadness, but recognition. Recognition of a woman I thought I'd buried back in Atlanta. The dream wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in second chances. And for the first time in years, I believed too. Dreams don't show up turnkey. They show up dusty, cracked, and smelling like mildew. That's how Mama's old restaurant looked the first day I unlocked it again. Sunlight pouring through grime-streaked windows onto broken booths and rusted fryers. Most folks would have called it hopeless. I called it a blank canvas. Roberts was right there, camera rolling, grinning like a kid in a candy store. "Tell me what you see," he asked. "Not what's here," I whispered, running my fingers along the counter. "What could be?" From that day on, Nourish became my second heartbeat. I couldn't afford contractors, so YouTube became my mentor. How to tile, how to paint, how to replace fixtures without electrocuting yourself. Weekends smelled like sawdust and sweat. Roberts lugged drywall, Mama scrubbed windows, neighbors pitched in for pizza. Every inch of progress was carved out of exhaustion and stubbornness. There were setbacks, so many. A busted pipe flooded half the dining room. The city inspector threatened fines if I didn't replace outdated wiring. Some nights I sat on the floor, head in my hands, whispering, "What was I thinking?" But then I'd remember the taste of that tahini bowl, Mama's smile, Robert's faith. And I'd get up, wipe my eyes, and keep going. Roberts never left. He showed up with tools he barely knew how to use, joking that his hammer skills were decorative. Truth was, he carried the heavy stuff, literally and emotionally. When I snapped under stress, he didn't argue. He'd just sit with me in silence until the fire burned down. And always, the camera. He filmed every nail, every paint stroke, every breakdown. "People need to see this," he'd say. Not just the finish line, the whole messy marathon. Romance lingered like background music I wasn't ready to play. Roberts asked me out more than once. Gentle, never pushy. "Dinner sometime?" I'd shake my head. "Not yet." "Okay," he'd smile. "I'll ask again later." 2 years blurred into one long grind. Ramen dinners, double shifts, hands raw from bleach. But slowly, the place transformed. Tired gray walls turned fresh and white. The dining room glowed under warm lights. A simple logo, a heart of intertwining leaves, went up over the door. We named it Nourish, for Mama, for everyone who needed more than food, who needed healing. Opening day felt like standing on a cliff. I set out 20 grain bowls, convinced no one would show. But by noon, we had a line out the door. Word spread like gospel. Healthy food, fair prices, run by a woman who poured her whole soul into every bite. The first year nearly broke me again. 16-hour days, bookkeeping on napkins, tears over broken blenders. But customers kept coming. Little by little, hope outweighed fear. One night after locking up, I slumped against the counter whispering, "It's working." Robert sat beside me, camera forgotten for once. "Told you," he said softly. "You're building more than a restaurant. You're building yourself back." And he was right. Nourish wasn't just food, it was proof. Proof that the woman Jerome discarded had hands strong enough to rebuild. For the first time, I wasn't surviving, I was creating. And though I wasn't ready to say it out loud, I was also beginning to wonder what it might mean to let love in again. 2 years into Nourish, I was running on fumes, but floating on pride. Customers lined up daily, regulars waved like family. My fridge broke down twice, my register once, but somehow we kept the doors open. For the first time in forever, I felt like I was doing more than just surviving. I was thriving. Barely, but still. And Roberts was there through it all. He kept filming, documenting every messy, beautiful piece of the journey. But he wasn't just a cameraman. He fixed leaky faucets, played handyman, and carried me home when exhaustion left me too tired to walk straight. He never asked for credit, never asked for repayment, just showed up. And still, he kept asking me out. Always gentle, never pushy. "Dinner?" he'd say with that crooked smile. "Not yet," I'd reply. My heart still wore bandages, and love felt like fire I wasn't ready to touch again. One Friday, though, something shifted. We just closed after the busiest day yet. My hands ached, my feet screamed. But when I looked at Roberts, hair mussed, shirt stained with paint, camera hanging lopsided, I felt something warm push past my fear. "Ask me again," I said quietly. His eyes widened. "Ask you what?" I smiled, tired but sure. "Dinner." He didn't play it cool. He laughed, loud and unashamed, like the sound of relief. "Rosalyn Johnson, would you go to dinner with me?" "Yes," I whispered. Yes, I would. Our first date was nothing fancy. A little Italian joint downtown, red checkered tablecloths, garlic bread dripping with butter. But it felt different, easy, like I could finally exhale. Roberts didn't fill the silence with ego. He asked about my dreams, not my flaws. He listened, really listened. And when dessert came, he confessed, "I've been in love with you for 2 years." My heart should have panicked. Instead, it settled. "I know," I said softly, "and I think I'm ready to love you back." From then on, we moved slow but steady. No rushing, no pretending. Our foundation was already there. Friendship, respect, laughter through hard days. Love just grew on top of it, like ivy on brick. 6 months later, he proposed, not with fireworks or grand gestures, but on a Sunday morning while chopping onions. "Marry me?" he asked, knife in hand, eyes searching mine. I laughed through tears. "Okay." We married at the courthouse on a Thursday. Mama cried, Robert's parents clapped, and I wore a simple white dress from Target. No frills, no hundreds of guests, just love that felt solid, real. And 3 months later, 2 miracles arrived at once. First, Roberts convinced me to let him post one of his videos online, a clip of me explaining Nourish's mission, face half hidden, voice steady. I braced for silence. Instead, it blew up. 10,000 views, then 50, then hundreds of thousands. Orders poured in from across the country. My little neighborhood dream went national overnight. The second miracle, a pink plus sign on a stick, then 3, all positive. I sat in the bathroom, shaking, laughing, crying. After years of being told I was barren, of being blamed and shamed, I was pregnant. When I told Roberts, he cried too. Not scared tears, joy, pure unfiltered joy. At 8 weeks, the ultrasound tech turned the screen toward us. "Do you hear that?" she asked. 1 heartbeat, then 2, then 3, triplets. I stared, stunned. Roberts squeezed my hand, whispering, "We're having triplets." It felt like the universe's sweetest revenge. The woman he once called broken was now carrying 3 lives at once. And in that sterile room, listening to those tiny heartbeats, I knew I had finally won back everything Jerome tried to take. By the time the girls turned 2, life was messy in the best way. Triplets meant chaos. Juice spills, crayon murals on walls, lullabies sung in shifts. Nourish had grown into a brand, orders shipping across states. Roberts kept filming, turning our story into something bigger than survival. For once, the soundtrack of my life wasn't heartbreak. It was laughter, squeals, and the constant beep of my oven timer. Then the phone rang. It was Mama's number, but her voice trembled. "Baby, it's him." Before I could ask, I heard it. That voice. Smooth, smug, unforgettable. "Jerome." Rosalyn, he said, like my name was an old trophy he dug out of storage. Long time. I'm calling with good news. I'm getting married. Silence stretched. He filled it with a chuckle. I'd like you to come. Consider it closure. Veronica and I would love to see you there. Closure. My stomach twisted. The man who'd called me barren, stolen my money, replaced me like a spare part. He wanted me to clap while he celebrated with the woman he betrayed me for. I almost hung up. Almost. But then he added, you should see what a real family looks like. Bring your whatever you've got going on. I don't mind. The dig sliced clean. He expected me to crawl in, small and forgotten, the ex-wife who couldn't measure up. He wanted an audience for my humiliation. But he didn't know me anymore. I glanced at Roberts rocking one daughter while another tugged at his shirt. The third was coloring on his jeans, and he just laughed. My gaze slid to the framed photo on the wall, our wedding day, simple and perfect. Then I looked at my girls, living proof that every lie Jerome told was dust. Fine, I said, my voice steady. I'll come. He hesitated, maybe surprised. Good, it's black tie. Don't be late. After he hung up, I sat frozen. Roberts crouched in front of me, searching my eyes. What did he want? He invited me to his wedding. Roberts's brows knit. You don't have to go. I know. My lips curved into something between a smile and a battle cry. But I think I will. Mama overheard and nearly dropped her teacup. Baby, why on earth? Because he thinks I'm still the same woman he broke, I said. He's about to learn I'm not. The weeks leading up to the wedding felt surreal. I found a deep emerald dress that hugged every curve confidence had given back to me. Roberts booked a limousine, refusing to let me drive myself into that battlefield. The girls would stay with Mama, but not before helping me zip my dress, their tiny hands patting me like I was armor. You look like a queen, Mommy, one whispered. No crown needed. Their words were enough. The night before, I barely slept. Old fears crept in, whispering, what if he still crushes you? What if walking in there proves nothing? But dawn brought clarity. It wasn't about Jerome. It was about me, about reclaiming the narrative, standing in the same room with my past and refusing to shrink. As the limousine door opened outside the glittering hotel, cameras flashing for guests in sequins and tuxedos, I stepped out. Emerald dress catching the lights, Roberts by my side, heart steady. And when I crossed that threshold, whispers rippled like wind through glass. Because I wasn't the ghost Jerome expected, I was the storm. The ballroom glittered like a movie set. Crystal chandeliers, tables draped in white linen. Champagne towers trembled under too much light. Every guest was dressed like royalty. And then there was me, emerald dress catching the glow, Roberts steady at my side. Conversations faltered, heads turned, whispers rose like smoke. That's her, the ex-wife. Jerome spotted me across the room. For a split second, his smirk faltered. Then it snapped back into place, slick and rehearsed. He strode over, Veronica hanging on his arm, her sequined gown clinging like foil. Well, well, he drawled, eyes sliding over me like I was a car he'd traded in. Didn't think you'd actually show. I smiled, cool as ice. You invited me. Would have been rude not to. Veronica's lips curved sharp. Brave of you to come. Must be awkward. Awkward? No. Delicious. We took our seats, endured the hollow speeches, the endless clinking of glasses. I sipped champagne, letting the fizz steady my nerves. Robert squeezed my hand under the table. I've got you, his touch said. Then came the moment. Veronica stood, glass in hand, eyes glittering with malice. I just want to thank everyone for celebrating true love tonight, she began. Unlike some relationships built on lies and infertility, this one is blessed. Gasps fluttered around the room. All eyes darted to me. Jerome's grin widened. That was my cue. I rose slowly, the room falling silent. My heart thudded, but my voice came steady, sharpened by years of swallowed truth. Funny you should mention lies, I said. I pulled my phone from my clutch, tapped play. Jerome's voice filled the ballroom, echoing off chandeliers. It's for us, Rosalyn, for our future together. The recording of him begging for my 12,000. Whispers erupted. I held up a folder next. And here, medical records, mine, all normal, perfectly healthy. Which means I slid another page free. The problem was never me. Jerome's face drained. And just in case anyone's confused, I continued, DNA results prove Fred isn't even his. And medical evaluations, Jerome has been infertile his whole life. The room gasped like one giant lung. Veronica dropped her glass. It shattered across marble. Jerome stammered, That's not true. Save it, I cut in, my voice like steel. For once, you don't get to control the story. Silence thundered. Every guest stared at him, not me, with judgment sharp as knives. Robert stood, sliding an arm around me. Calm, proud, the weight of his love steadied me more than any applause could. Jerome's mask cracked, fury spilling across his features. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Not with proof pinned against him like a crime scene. I looked around, meeting the eyes of strangers who suddenly saw the truth. And in that moment, I wasn't the ex-wife. I was the survivor. I set down the folder, lifted my glass, and said softly, to honesty. And then I walked out. Robert's beside me, head high, the ballroom left gasping in our wake. Outside, the limousine waited, city lights shimmering. As the door closed behind us, I exhaled years of poison. For the first time, I felt free. The limousine pulled away from the hotel, and with it, the weight of 6 years slid off my shoulders. I watched the ballroom fade in the rearview, a glittering cage I no longer lived in. Robert squeezed my hand. Neither of us spoke for a long while. Silence had never felt so loud or so freeing. News of the wedding disaster spread faster than fire on dry grass. Within days, clips of my recording leaked. Guests whispered, posts went viral. Jerome's shiny empire cracked wide open. Investors pulled out, customers walked away. Soon his beloved laundromat chain filed for bankruptcy. The man who once sneered that I was nothing without him was suddenly nothing without the lies he built. Veronica filed for divorce before their honeymoon photos even dried on Instagram. Rumor had it she cleaned him out of what little he had left. Karma doesn't send save the dates, but it always arrives right on time. Meanwhile, life for me blossomed in color. Nourish exploded in popularity. After Roberts released our full documentary, viewers across the country watched my journey, abuse, betrayal, rebirth, and saw not tragedy, but triumph. Orders doubled, then tripled. Partnerships formed. I was invited to speak at women's conferences, to share not just food, but truth. That survival isn't the end of the story. Thriving is. The lawsuit came next. That $12,000 gift, a judge didn't buy it. With interest and damages, I walked away with nearly $400,000, money I could have used to gloat. Instead, I donated a hefty portion to shelters and nonprofits helping women escape abuse. The rest rebuilt Nourish, expanded it into a franchise, and secured my daughter's futures. Speaking of my girls, they were my truest justice. 3 bright-eyed, wild-hearted reminders that Jerome's cruelest lie had been exactly that. A lie. Every time they laughed, every time their tiny hands tugged mine, I felt like the universe itself whispered, see, you were always enough. Roberts and I built a home filled with noise and color, messy mornings, bedtime stories, business meetings at the kitchen table while the girls painted the walls with jelly. It wasn't perfect, nothing real is, but it was ours, and it was good. Years later, when I stood on stage in front of 1,000 women telling my story, I ended with the words I wish someone had told me back then. You are not the names they call you. You are not the lies they tell about you. You are not broken. You are not barren. You are not less. You are proof that survival is possible, that starting over is powerful, and that thriving is your birthright. The crowd stood, clapping, crying, cheering. And in the back, I saw Roberts holding our girls, pride shining in his eyes. So if you're listening to this, wherever you are, remember this. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so radiant, so undeniable, that the people who tried to bury you end up choking on their own dust. Thanks for riding through my story. If it touched you, hit subscribe, share it with someone who needs hope, and keep listening. Because every story I tell here is a reminder. Pain isn't the ending. It's the beginning of power.